Hello and welcome to the program. It's now 1 year since President Muhammadu Buhari was sworn in, of course, as the leader of this country. He is the very first opposition candidate to unseat an incumbent president in the history of Nigeria's democracy, when he and his All Progressives Congress defeated incumbent at the time, Goodluck Jonathan and his People's Democratic Party. Now, before that election in 2015, the PDP had governed Nigeria uninterrupted for 16 years. Few gave the APC any chance to unseat the PDP. Despite my years of covering politics, I also doubted very much that the APC could push out the PDP. Perhaps we underestimated the level of public discontent against the PDP government. Well, the rest, as I say, is history. Now, President Buhari and the APC rode to power on the back of a campaign anchored on change. They promised so much, but 1 year after, are we beginning to see that sign of positive change? Naturally, virtually every Nigerian would have an opinion to express on the performance of the APC government. Unfortunately, we can't bring everyone here to the studio, and that's the reason I have invited two gentlemen to give us their overview of the Buhari government so far. Libros Oshoma is a lawyer and a political analyst, and of course a regular guest on this program. I also have Bolaji Okusaga, public relations expert and public affairs analyst, who is coming on this platform for the very first time. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. And Bolaji, because this is your first time on this platform, let me start with you. Yeah. Let's face it, the Buhari's administration has not said in any way that it has accomplished so much over the past 1 year. I mean, it hasn't said that. What we've seen and what the minister said that we saw there is that they're actually laying the foundation, and that very soon Nigerians will begin to see that change, the promised. But no doubt, 1 year is gone. Some things ought to have been done. Let me get your own take on this government.
Well, my take on the government is that 365 days is enough for you to have, been able to put some kind of imprint in terms of good governance, and so people start to then look forward to, the subsequent year and then the year after.
And when you're talking about imprints, you surely must be looking at the economy.
Now, basically, I'm going to anchor it on two things. Whilst the Buhari government has brought some form of confidence into the system, given the fact that before their entry, there seemed to be this atmosphere of, lack of trust, for Nigeria on the global scene. Now he's brought in a bit of a much more welcoming kind of mien, in terms of association with, the global community. But let's leave that aside. He came in at a very tough time, at a time when our major source of revenue earner had taken a bashing by more than 50%.
More than 60, actually.
And it looked like with, the shale oil rampage, that it was going to go more, even lower than that, and it did actually happen. However, one fundamental mistake that the government made was that they did not seize the momentum. And it appears that they're losing momentum now because they did not strike while it was hottest. And we'll talk about that, in the course of this program.
All right. Libros, let me get your own take. I mean, generally speaking now, before we begin to narrow down this discussion.
Yeah, I believe that a lot were left undone, and even the president also admitted that he would rather be slow and steady than a lot of people want him to be, to do things in a hurry. But I don't think it was slow and steady. For me, I felt it was, I would call it laziness on the part of the president and his team, because if you look at from when he won the election, a lot of people had thought that he would have been able to put a team together.
It took him a long time.
It took him a long time to put a team together, and then also knowing fully well that you were going to pass your first budget. You would have put a team together, and then that would immediately start working on what you want to do for the next year, and then you put your team together less than 10 weeks to the presentation of the budget, and we saw how that spanned out also. And coupled with the fact that if you want to drive a paradigm shift, you ought to understand the institutional framework. You ought also to know the powers of, you know, the lawmakers, the National Assembly, and the role that, the strategic role that they should play. Nobody was begging Mr. President to say, look, you must impose, but at least you lobby, you know, so that you have people that are on the same ideological plane with you to ensure that, you know, things move smoothly in that direction, because you can't be everywhere at the same time. All of these, you know, we're lost with the time. And but I like he said, also coming in, because of the problem at that time, because of the trust that he had, I expected some of the policies, decisions that they are taking, and I expected that those policies, decisions should have been taken at that time. The Nigerians would have swallowed it, and all the long sufferings would have been avoided. And then hopefully by now, you know, probably would have been seeing, you know, the advantages, but all of that.
And of course, when you talk about policies not taking earlier than now, you would of course be referring, for instance, to the removal of petrol subsidy and all of that.
Yes.
Bolaji, let's face it, could we also say that part of the problems, or part of the problem with the government is that the transition wasn't smooth? I mean, let's face it, we can't deny that. Just hold on now, that the transition wasn't smooth, and that because it was the very first time that an opposition party would be taking over from a ruling party, things were not done smoothly at all. For instance, we had complaints of, you know, no handing over notes, that they actually had to start from nowhere at all, that when they came into office, they were like groping in the dark. Could that have also been, you know, could that have contributed to why the government took off too slowly?
Well, one thing I'll tell you is that beyond handover, I don't imagine that the guys who actually, you know, constituted, you know, the fulcrum of the team that took power, you know, had new fights in government. Buhari had been an head of state for about 18 months. You had the likes of Amici, who was a state governor. You had Fashola. You had a number of them who actually understood the framework and could actually get internal intelligence, right? And they also had a transition team which actually submitted a report
of course
to the president. So I don't want to take the whole idea of the lack of a proper handover as an excuse for not actually acting. What I see, I probably think was the main issue is that you have a man who is linear in terms of, you know, thinking. So he cannot accommodate too many things at the same time. So he was so single-minded about the whole idea of fighting corruption that he forgot that there are fundamentals that we needed to take care of, because in trying to kill a rat, if you set the house on fire, the rat will be dead, but of course the house will not exist, so you won't have shelter over your head. I think that part of the problem was that there were no codified programs. There was no blueprint as regards how do I really want to run the country. I know that there's so much corruption, you know, I want to come fight corruption. But beyond fighting corruption, what are the other things I need to do to be able to guarantee, you know, the well-being of the entire citizenry? Those were things that were not on the table. So when they confronted with crisis, the first thing he tried to do was to say, look, let me defend the base of the pyramid. Let me not devalue. Let me not deregulate. Let me not do X, Y, Z. All of the things that would have been much more strategic at the time, you know, because given the fact that he had enormous goodwill, that if he had done those things at that time, the dividend of those things would have started to actually sprout. Now, let me give you one fundamental thing I find very funny. You came in at a time when oil price was about $60, yeah, a barrel. And over the course of 5 months, as you prevaricated, the thing plummeted to
28.
Lower than $40. No, 28 didn't happen until January, late December, January. The thing plummeted by another 25% over the course of the time that you were prevaricating. And of course, by the time you looked at, you know, the transition report, even their projections already affected by that.
Yeah,
the wastage of that time.
The transition committee had actually suggested that should have been the first thing to do. Take subsidy away.
Right. So by the time he now said, okay, let me now come to grips with governance, he appointed a team that I would imagine was suspect, because we had thought that he will have more technocrats in critical areas, the guys that could actually go on and actually, you know, already have a playbook, since there was really no policy in place. And then again, he shot himself in the foot by saying, look, all of the programs that were in the sphere of public opinion and people were assessing and debating that even Soludo made a commentary on were not original to him. Then we started to ask a question, so where are we really headed? So I think that it was the linear thinking, not the lack of good intention or integrity that's been the problem in the last 1 year. And I think that's got to change if we are
Liberals, let's face it, would it have been, I mean, talking as a political analyst now, would it have been politically correct, for instance, for a president who rode on a massive wave of goodwill, for that president now to come in and the first thing he does is to, say, for instance, remove subsidy, especially when you're dealing with a president who had always maintained that he didn't believe there was subsidy in the first place?
Is it also not correct now that a man who came to office on the crest of goodwill?
Should it be the first thing should it be the first gift you give to the people who...
But even at that time, there were queues at the filling station, and subsequently, the problem became so enormous that it became uncontrollable. And at the end of the day, they had to come to terms with reality. But if at that time, following the recommendation of even the Transition Committee, they had taken that step.
The Transition Committee, of course, would say that.
Yes, and then they had taken that step. All of these town hall meetings would have been avoided. All it would have taken would have been, Nigerians knew that there was a problem somewhere. Yes, the president at that time. And then coupled with the fact that...
I'm not arguing with you, but I'm just saying, politically speaking...
Yes.
I'm not talking about... Listen, I'm not talking about the economics of it. You're absolutely correct. But politically speaking, don't you think, as a politician, for instance, that you would lose a lot of political capital and mileage if at the very first time you come into office?
DEJI, which one would have been better? You lose political mileage in your first 2 months in office, and then in the next 6-8 months, people are beginning to see that, this was well intended, or you allow people to suffer for 1 year before you now begin to do the right thing. By suffering for 1 year, the political goodwill that you will lose, and that's why there's so much cry in the land now. And that's why people are saying this wasn't what we bargained for. And that's why you see the ministers going around trying to talk to people. And then also the slogan then at that time was, we did not know that the problems were this enormous. And so a lot of people bought into that in the first few months. They didn't know the problem with this or no more. So if you are taking those strategic decisions at that time, people would also have been appreciated the fact that because you didn't know the problems with this or no more, coupled with your projections, and then what was coming in, and that it was time for the government to actually do a turnaround. But all that didn't happen. It was still as if, and a lot of people said the government was still acting as if they were in opposition. And so they were not prepared. They really didn't believe that they were going to win the election, like we all also believed. And so when they won the election, it took their time to come to terms with reality. And some of the policies and then you had a government that said, look, we're not going to devalue. We're not going to devalue, and then you head on to subsidy in the petroleum sector. You also head on to subsidy in the forex, or you kept doing everything to ensure that you maintain, a particular figure, which was not workable. And
in terms of your reserve,
maybe
you couldn't even afford to actually fund imports.
Well,
really.
maybe
exactly.
Maybe that's where the problem is, that the government or the president was actually trying to appeal to popular sentiments and not knowing that
but
this hasn't got anything to do.
There's a limit. Yeah, I'll tell you something. You take over an ailing company that's overstaffed, that needs to obviously lose weight. You look at the balance sheet and you find out that look, your expense, you are spending more than you are earning. You look at certain institutional frameworks, like and you see obvious leakages. The first thing you do, you cut, you lose weight. The same way you do restructuring in the private sector. It's the same way you do restructuring. I'm coming somewhere.
Hold on.
The same way you do restructuring in the public sector.
I think
so
if you ask
if I were going to be a turnaround manager, the first thing to do when you get to office is to explain to people the need for some of these actions.
You don't think you're looking
Not
at
to
this?
say- not
you don't
to
think
them buy time.
you're not looking at this from a political angle.
No,
so to
I'm
speak.
going to come back
Yeah,
to the political angle.
That you're probably looking
No,
at it.
I'm going to come back to the political
sorry,
angle. Just give me 2 minutes. The truth is, who better can to restructure Nigeria than the Buhari with enormous goodwill? He was the man for the job. Unfortunately, he didn't seize the moment. I'm hoping that the next 3 years will be quite different, but in the last 1 year, he had prevaricated over very important issues. Talking about what's your mandate? What policy are you coming to government to drive? Who is the team that's going to be working with you on that project? It took 6 months for us to actually know.
Yeah.
Now,
Quite
even the fight against corruption, what we're saying is that if you've thrown it back to the conventional courts, you're not likely to make so much progress.
No,
so
but
the first thing you should have done was actually,
to
let me tell you,
create a
you know
special
what,
court.
you know what Yar'Adua did with, he came in at the back of electoral malpractices. The first thing he did was to review the Electoral Act. And he actually used the instrument of the law to make the fundamental changes that the new Electoral Act that we're looking at was the outcome of Yar'Adua's broadcast that never again will we have.
How else would you have wanted the president to deal with this? Like establish a special court?
Let me,
you know, you're a lawyer.
Establishing a special court, you know, that would have been a long-term thing. But in the short term, what do? You already had the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, you know, novel, fantastic, made provisions for some of these problems, you know, most of those problems. And so what do? There are provisions because investigations, prosecution starts from investigation. So there are enormous provisions in that act that will take care of those lacunas in investigation. As we talk now, the fight against corruption, it's just around 3 persons. The president, the EFCC chairman, and Rotimi Jacobs, the EFCC prosecutor. Tens there. After that, nothing more. And so what you should have done, the Nigerian police is a body statutorily empowered to investigate crimes and their fraud. You also set up an arm. How do we ensure that we reform and restructure? And then you don't need to, because special courts, you will need to carry out the constitutional amendment. But what Osinbajo did in Lagos, they didn't create special courts, but they segmented the courts. You had criminal divisions. So if you know you're going to have more criminal cases, you expand the scope of criminal division and have more hands. So they won't be overwhelmed. And that didn't happen.
Do you think they're overwhelmed now?
As I tell you, they are because apart from the EFCC cases, you have the normal cases that keeps coming every day. And so all of these are, you expect one man to, when you hear EFCC cases, 3 names, 3 judges come to mind. You hear Justice Abang, you hear Justice Ademola.
The judges are trying anyway because they see almost on a daily basis. There's no doubt.
Exactly. But how many cases will they be able to see through within the lifespan of this administration?
Yeah, the number of cases
that will really make the fight against corruption what it's
so
like.
you
See,
need
the
to,
sensation around the fight is more than the substance of it right now because there's no structure to actually drive it. There was one committee on the anti-corruption committee. We've not heard any pronouncement.
No, but that committee too said it wouldn't
advisory.
be. It's an advisory committee,
Yes.
and that committee also said it wouldn't be appropriate, for instance, to even create the special courts you talked about.
That's what I'm saying. And so,
if you were asking me, if you are going to ask me, I would imagine that to give bite to the fight against corruption,
that you create a special court.
You need to create special courts so that you can actually, be fast in terms of prosecution of these cases. What we're seeing now is that you've gotten several arrests. Some people have even been said to have refunded monies and all of that. But all of this is happening so haphazardly. And we're not likely to be able to see the kind of convictions that will really give bite to that fight.
Another thing I want to ask, should we be concerned? Let's talk about this anti-corruption fight now. Should we be concerned about convictions or we should go after the monies?
DG.
No, I'm just asking you your opinion.
In my opinion, because when we talk about anti-corruption, we look at it from the political level alone. It is people from the grassroots that graduate to that level.
Of course.
And so, apart from plugging loopholes and ensuring that those things that made it possible for somebody to take 500 million naira monthly, from an account, are plugged. But then, apart from that, you also need to nationalize that fight to ensure that that man who had the capacity to aspire to political office, you cleanse his mind of that,
No doubt, but I still want you to answer that
I'm
question.
I'm coming there. And so when you go after the money alone, how much are we talking about here? A man can steal 2 billion and decide to refund 500 million. And so we would see that happen before. At the end of the day, he's asked to go home and say no more.
But
you recover the money.
Hold on now.
You
but
also
is there not, just hold on now. Isn't it also a problem that if a man steals and then you catch him and he's convicted, probably send him to... hold on. Probably give him 5 years or say 10 years and he doesn't return anything.
No, you return, you get what you can get from that man and then also use him as a deterrent, to ensure that people... It's not about, look, we've collected 500 million from this man and then he goes home. What you're telling those that have the capacity to steal is when you're stealing next time, steal 3 billion.
Make a gap for refund.
Make great room for refund. So you can refund something and ask to go and say no more. How much do you know that, it's in the pocket of this man?
If the fight is even going to have any bites, the whole idea of plea bargain, the whole idea of refund should be secondary.
Yes.
We are trying to re-engineer society. And the only way to do it is to actually be sure that people answer for their crime. All right.
Now we're hearing that some people are now willing to return the money
if the entire fight, against corruption is about refund of monies, then we don't even need a fight. We just need a negotiation panel. You've stolen this much. This is the evidence that you've stolen. How much are you recovering? And if it's a fight, you want to actually be sure that the guys are convicted, those cases are documented, and that we bring to bear institutional memory in such a way that, these things don't repeat itself again. That's why we're saying, is the fight really against corruption or against corrupt people? There's a difference, even though they look very similar. In fighting corruption, of course, you fight corrupt people, but you'll also put a process in place that will be fed by institutional memory, such that these things don't continue to repeat themselves. Now, in saying this, I want to go back to what happened in the tribunals of 1984. We're beginning to, even those ones seem to have some bite under the military regime because they were special tribunals and cases went on. But see what happened.
Military regime, anyway.
Yes, see what happened thereafter. See what happened thereafter. The next regime that now succeeded that government actually institutionalized corruption as opposed to actually, firming up the good work that they had started at the time. Now, under this dispensation, what we have seen thus far is mere tokenism and a lot of sensationalism, around this whole fight against corruption, because we're not likely to get conviction. We're not likely to learn many lessons.
We absolutely cannot say that because that will be indicting the courts. I mean, we just have to wait.
Because of the time. Because we know that
I can understand why most Nigerians will feel that way. Quite a number of Nigerians, but we still need to give the courts the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I agree, but quickly, let me take your mind away from this a little bit. So most of the investigations that you hear today are successful because of the programs of one man back then, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi. It took Sanusi Lamido Sanusi to say, look, we want to operate a cashless society. You can no longer carry cash around. Just imagine that if this money that we talk about had been moving around like it used to, it would have been difficult for you to trace. So what are we doing as we speak today now to ensure that we institutionalize, programs like that, to ensure that you block loopholes, to make sure that, corruption
anyway,
is no longer attractive.
Very quickly now, because we have to end this discussion, going forward, I mean, the government is just 1 year. 1 year in office. It has 3 more years to go. The general belief is that we should soon begin to see things happen. Even the government too has said, Nigerians should just be patient. We should begin to see things happen going forward. But going forward for you, what exactly would you want to see? If you were talking to the government now and talking to the president, talking to the ears of this government, what exactly would you...
We need to see a total end to propaganda. We need to now start having the substance, not the propaganda. Now, and what do I mean by that? We need to start defining what it is that we're trying to do, what the cycle time for doing it will be, and what are the likely encumbrances to achieving that progress, and what are we doing to mitigate that. That is what governance is about. What we had seen in the last 1 year is that we've seen more propaganda than we've seen action. Now, propagandas don't move the cheese. Remember, our economy is contracting, and there are palpable fears of a recession, because if Q2 were to go the way of Q1, of course, obviously we'll officially
Well, if
be
you
in
ask me,
recession.
we're going to have a recession.
No.
I mean,
If that were to kick in.
Basically, we know the outcome of Q2.
You can't be too...
We know the outcome of Q2. No, we know the outcome of Q2. Okay.
Yeah, you for me, every government should have short-term measures, medium-term and long-term measures. And then also there's need to engage the people. You know, don't talk at them, talk with them. And you need to carry them along. People need to understand. If you sell hope to the people, in selling hope, they need to understand the blueprint of the government. Basically what he said. Look, this is where this government is going to. And then when people see you march progressively in that direction, they are going, no matter how long it will take them, they are going to, you know, work with you. And then also, we need to see a departure from the norm, where government will live large, and then you expect the people to tighten their belts. You know, the president made a lot of promises during the campaign. Oh, like the presidential jets.
Yeah,
you know,
fleet, yeah.
You ask yourself, what are these still doing? The convoys of ministers, and you know, imagine a minister saying, oh, somebody said the minister has 16 cars. He said, no, they are 15. I actually sacrificed one for sake of change. And then you begin to ask yourself, in this day and era, and now that your fuel is selling for 145, you wonder,
what
states we still fund all of those cars.
And they're moving around in private jets.
And one thing we're actually
services,
not talking about, and that's the problem we have in this country, we are actually not looking at the states and the state governors as well. Everybody's attention seems focused on...
We should go there. We should go there quickly. Because 1 year of Buhari administration is not just about Buhari.
Yeah,
honestly. Now all of a sudden we're beginning to see that we have 26 states about to go insolvent, but we're still seeing the same kind of lifestyle
of these governors,
you know, when in boom time. Now we really need to start seeing something within the next 3 years, a restructuring of the public service. Can we carry that weight? Do we really start to think about this whole idea of feeding bottle federalism that we're running is not viable, or is it sustainable? We need to start asking ourselves whether we even need 36 states to start with. And do we even need a bicameral legislature at the center to start with? Because all of these things...
DEJI, quickly, you see, part of the campaign promises also were, whatever you want to call it, organic federalism, true federalism, state policing, and, you know, with the problem of insecurity in the land, it is no longer feasible to take a man from Arugungu and ask him to go police somebody in Erumukokware. Or you take somebody from...
so we should have state police.
You know, these are areas...
These are fundamental issues that we need to look at.
And then with that, you face reality. Are we going back to regionalism, or we can
and the truth, and what's the solution to this quagmire? We are not... I do not think that any government that really desires to make change should keep FAC the way it is. It looks to me that there's a Father Christmas somewhere at the center that dispenses cash month on month. Now, what are these states themselves doing?
That's a question.
I mean, if I run a company and my subvention is bigger than the revenue I'm able to generate, then there's a problem with that company.
You have a branch, shut it down, where at the end of the month, the head office sends money to you consistently to operate. You wouldn't need to work.
But that is the problem. My problem is, look, these states, nobody stops the governors from thinking outside the box.
When there is a...
but there are legal encumbrances. Let me tell you the legal encumbrances. Control of mineral resources.
If you look at the exclusive list,
we're not looking at mineral resources. For instance, now the governors are asking for a review of the revenue sharing formula. And I was saying, look, if you're asking for the review of the revenue sharing formula, I mean, it basically means one thing. You want more revenues, you should be getting more responsibilities. Yes. That's the basic thing. Because there's no way you can review the revenue sharing formula without looking at the responsibilities.
Even government has the same federal government concession a lot of their responsibilities, but they still keep the larger chunk of the revenue. So we need to look at the structure and ask ourselves, is it viable to have this mushroom states?
Because some people are even still saying they want more states.
Yes.
No. The simple solution.
We can't be talking about more
the
states
simple
now.
solution is this.
50-something requests for more states.
Yeah. The simple solution is this. We need to end the era of big government. We need to enable the private sector, which is the real engine room for productivity. And growth. What we've seen in the last 1 year is that government has grown so big and businesses has grown so small.
Gentlemen, thank
what
you
are
very
we
much.
doing with 11 aircrafts in the presidential fleet?
Actually,
What are we? No, I mean, because I understand that they said that one is probably not serviceable, so we're not counting that one. So, what are we doing with too many advisors and?
Well, no, we don't have too many advisors now. Just hold on, Bolaji. In this government, we don't have too many advisors. I'm not holding forth for the government. But, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for coming on the program. And Liberals, you know what? Don't be too surprised. Tomorrow you might be asking for your own state. It all depends.
Even the one I have is not viable. So I need the state to be returned back to the way it was.
You might be asking for your own state.
No, we need Bender State back.
Fact is, we don't need more states in this country. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. And let's just be hopeful that things look up in the next 3 years. I mean, we want this government to succeed.
Oh, yes.
It's
not, if they succeed,
it's
we
not
succeed.
some people's government.
Succeed.
It is our government. So if it succeeds, we all succeed. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. And we'll take a short break now and stay with us. Every day, every hour, and every minute, news break in Nigeria. Things happen so fast, it's most times difficult to track and comprehend them. But that's what we do right here on DEJI360. 2015, would you want to come back again?
It's like asking Jesus Christ if he knew he was going to die, will you want to come back as the savior of the world again?
We do not just help you track the stories, we break them down, explore all the angles, analyze the issues so that you can fully comprehend the stories and use them to make the right decisions.